Rita sat on the bathroom floor with the pregnancy test lying across her palm, like a tiny object, carrying a massive truth. Two bold pink lines stared back at her, clear, confident, and impossible to misinterpret. Instead of shouting or crying, she breathed in slowly, letting the reality settle inside her like warm water filling a glass. She touched her stomach gently, not out of excitement, but out of quiet acknowledgement. Something had shifted in her life, and she knew it wasn't just the presence of a child. It was the timing, the uneasy stillness in her marriage, and the strange distance that had grown between her and Darius without either of them ever naming it. She remained seated, leaning her head against the cool tiles, allowing the whirring of the bathroom extractor fan to fill the silence. For weeks, she had been sensing change. Small things like the way Darius shielded his phone, the sudden increase in late nights, the faint perfumes that weren't hers. Yet she had stayed calm, choosing observation over confrontation. This pregnancy brought a new kind of clarity, the kind that forced a woman to examine the ground she stood on and ask, is this soil steady enough for a child? Her heart tightened, but she stayed composed, knowing panic wouldn't solve anything. Finally, she rose slowly, rinsed her face, and faced her reflection in the mirror. She didn't look like a woman shattered by uncertainty. She looked like someone gathering strength quietly, the way a storm gathers clouds before releasing rain. You came at a strange time, she whispered to the unborn child, but you are welcome. That simple sentence became the anchor she needed. Whatever storm she was about to step into, she would face it with a calm dignity she had spent years building. That evening, the house felt normal enough to deceive a stranger. The TV murmuring football commentary, the scent of jollof rice drifting from the kitchen, and Darius sitting casually on the couch with his phone half hidden beside him. But Rita noticed everything. She walked toward him with measured steps, knowing the news she carried deserved honesty and presence. Darius, she said softly, come to the dining table for a minute. He obliged, his curiosity mild, but his eyes too restless to belong to a man at peace. When she told him, I'm pregnant, the shift in his expression was immediate. For a long heartbeat he simply stared, and when his smile finally appeared, it came late and landed awkwardly, like a man performing happiness rather than feeling it. He hugged her gently, but his arms were stiff. His heart raced too fast. His joy felt rehearsed. Rita felt each detail like a pin against her skin. She had loved Darius long enough to know what genuine excitement looked like on him. And this wasn't it. Something else was sitting behind his eyes, something tight, something guilty, something afraid. She didn't confront him. She simply nodded slowly and said, we'll go for a scan later. He agreed too quickly, relief flashing across his face as if she had given him extra time for an exam he wasn't prepared for. When he returned to the couch and resumed pretending to watch his match, Rita remained seated at the dining table, gently placing a hand over her stomach. She whispered silently to her child, your father is confused, but I will not be. Calmly, she decided to watch Darius, not through anger, but through clarity. In a serviced Lecky apartment miles away, Selina stared at her own pregnancy test with the expression of a woman who believed she had just won a competition. She twirled in front of her bathroom mirror, laughing breathlessly, clutching the test like a golden ticket. For her, the two pink lines weren't just a medical result. They were a promise, a doorway, a weapon wrapped inside a blessing. After 2 years of being the woman in the shadows, she believed the universe had finally decided to reward her patience. She imagined everything. Darius confessing to his wife, Rita screaming, Rita packing her bags, Darius finally calling her openly, showing up at appointments, buying her an apartment in his name, introducing her as his new beginning. In Selina's mind, pregnancy equaled power, and power meant she had finally climbed above the wife who held the position she believed she deserved. She felt triumphant, unstoppable, ready to claim the life she had always fantasized about whenever Darius whispered sweet lies in her ear. With a dramatic smile, she picked up her phone and crafted the message she believed would shake Darius's world. Baby, I took a test. You're going to be a father again. This time for me. She added heart emojis and hit send without hesitation. She stretched out on the bed afterward, hugging herself as if already celebrating her imagined victory. She didn't know that the very message she believed would crown her would be the same message that collapsed everything she hoped for. Darius received Selina's message while the football match was still playing, and the moment he read it, the room seemed to shrink around him. His heart slammed against his ribs as panic shot through his body. He stood up abruptly, pretending he wanted water, but in reality he was trying to breathe. His wife was pregnant. His mistress was also pregnant. Two lives growing at the same time, with two women who had no idea their timelines were colliding. For the first time since he began the affair, he realized he wasn't dealing with romance or pleasure. He was dealing with consequences that could unmake his entire life. He knew Rita well. If she discovered the truth, the marriage would crack, and with it would go the stability he relied on more than he admitted. The company ran under her name. The house deed bore her signature. Their entire financial backbone was tied to her family's empire. Divorce wouldn't just break his home. It would bury him financially and publicly. Selina's news didn't feel like joy. It felt like a wrecking ball with his name written on it. Yet, in the mastermind future Selina built in her mind, she assumed he would choose her. She had no idea what she was asking him to risk. Hands trembling, Darius typed a weak response. "I need time to process this. Don't tell anyone." But the truth was sinking in deeper than fear. Both women were pregnant, but only one woman held the power to destroy or save him. Selina had his child, yes, but Rita held his entire life. The next morning, Rita stood by the bedroom window, letting the early light brush across her skin as she quietly processed the fragile future growing inside her. Behind her, Darius lay in bed pretending to sleep, clutching his phone like a lifeline. When it vibrated again, and Selina's name flashed across the screen, he panicked. He should have ignored it. Instead, driven by fear, he answered in a whisper. But Selina wasn't in the mood for whispering. Her voice burst through the phone, loud, emotional, demanding. "Darius, I'm carrying your child. When are you telling your wife? I won't hide forever." The sentence froze the entire room. Rita stepped out of the bathroom with her face still damp, towel in hand, and stopped mid-step. She didn't scream. She didn't drop anything. She simply stared at her husband, the words replaying themselves in the air like a bomb that hadn't finished exploding. Darius stared back, guilt and shock written across his face as he scrambled to end the call. But it was too late. The truth had already spilled into every corner of the room. Rita sat calmly on the edge of the bed, eyes steady, breathing controlled. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but painfully clear. "So, we are both pregnant for you." There was no drama, only clarity, disappointment, and a quiet strength that terrified Darius more than any shouting could. It was in that moment he realized Rita was not a woman he could afford to lose. Rita didn't explode the way unfaithful husbands expect their wives to explode. She didn't throw things, didn't curse, didn't storm out of the room. Instead, she stood up slowly, walked to her wardrobe, and began arranging clothes with the calmness of a woman sorting documents. Her silence filled the entire room like smoke, thick, unsettling, suffocating. Darius watched her in confusion, his heart pounding harder with every second she refused to speak. Silence was supposed to be peace, yet somehow Rita's silence felt like judgment, like a courtroom without the shouting, but with a verdict already forming. When she finally met his eyes, her expression wasn't angry, it was calculating, observant, almost clinical, as if she were studying a problem she intended to solve thoroughly. Darius took a step toward her, guilt swirling in his chest, but Rita raised her hand softly, stopping him without raising her voice. "Don't speak," she said calmly, "not until I understand what kind of man I married." That sentence cut deeper than any slap could. She went about her day with the composed efficiency of a CEO reviewing quarterly losses, not a wife discovering betrayal. She made breakfast. She logged into a virtual meeting. She answered work calls. Yet every movement carried a dignity that told Darius he had broken something far more delicate than trust. He had broken the belief she once had in his integrity. And the scariest part was that Rita didn't display even a single crack. No tears, no trembling, no desperation. She was steady, too steady, And that steadiness was what terrified him. Throughout the day, Darius hovered around her like a man trying to save a sinking ship with his bare hands. He cooked lunch she didn't eat, attempted conversations she didn't entertain, followed her from room to room hoping for a dramatic confrontation he could apologize his way out of. But she refused to give him anger. She refused to give him reaction. She refused to give him access to her feelings. And that is when he finally understood. An angry woman can still be soothed, but a quiet woman, especially one like Rita, was already thinking of survival, of consequences, of decisions that would reshape both their lives. Her silence was not peace. It was the sound of power tightening itself. Selina had grown impatient waiting for Darius to react to her pregnancy announcement. In her mind, any decent man should have rushed to her side immediately, panicked, excited, grateful. When hours passed without the dramatic attention she expected, she decided to create her own moment. She dressed in a fitted floral dress, fixed her wig properly, and took a cab straight to Rita's office. She imagined a scene, Rita gasping in shock, colleagues whispering, Darius receiving calls begging him to come handle this woman. Selina loved drama the way some women love jewelry. It made her feel powerful. When she barged into the reception area of Rita's corporate space, she walked with the confidence of someone who believed her presence alone was an announcement. She didn't bother waiting to be let in. She stormed into Rita's office like a victor entering conquered territory, one hand on her waist and the other resting dramatically on her small stomach. "Mrs. Rita," she said loudly, "congratulations to you. But I guess I should congratulate myself too. We're both expecting babies from your husband." The interns outside gasped. A junior staff member dropped a pen. Selina stood proudly, expecting Rita to unravel, to cry, to beg for explanations. But Rita simply looked up from her laptop, her posture elegant, composed, and unbothered. She closed the system slowly, crossed her legs, and studied Selina like an interesting but irrelevant file that needed sorting. "Are you finished?" she asked softly. The softness, instead of calming Selina, rattled her. Rita didn't hurl insults or fling papers. She didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Pregnancy doesn't give you authority here. Not in my life, not in my home, and certainly not in my workplace." Selina faltered, realizing too late that she had underestimated the wrong woman. She expected war, but Rita was giving her strategy, cold, quiet, and far more dangerous than screaming. The next morning, while Darius still sat in the living room drowning in guilt, Rita calmly reviewed documents at the dining table. She didn't do it for effect. This was her normal routine. But for the first time, Darius noticed the details, her signature on company files, her name on business stamps, her steady hand flipping through pages of an enterprise he previously believed he controlled. The truth was written everywhere, but he had never bothered to look closely. The company he had been bragging about for years, the one he claimed as his business, was in fact positioned legally under one person, Rita. She had inherited the foundation of it from her father, expanded it with her own intelligence, and structured it carefully so no one, not even her husband, could destabilize it without her permission. As she highlighted something on a document, Darius walked closer, reading the letterhead again and again. Rita, a Digwe, managing director and majority shareholder. His chest tightened. He had known she was smart, capable, respected, but he hadn't fully grasped the extent of her authority. Selina had assumed that Rita was the helpless wife, but in reality, Rita was the pillar that kept both their marriage and Darius's lifestyle standing. If she walked away, if she withdrew her support, if she shifted a few signatures, Darius wouldn't just lose a wife. He would lose the foundation of his entire existence. Later in the afternoon, Rita looked up from her work and spoke with precise calm. "Darius, let me remind you of one thing," she said, her tone even but unyielding. "You may have created problems outside, but everything you rely on, the business, the home, the stability, rests on my structure, not yours." He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settling like stones in his stomach. For the first time, he realized that Selina's pregnancy didn't place her above Rita. It placed him beneath consequences he was completely unprepared for. Rita didn't need threats or theatrics. Her strength was already built into the foundation of his life. The following days felt like walking through a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Every time he glanced at Rita, her composure reminded him of the mountain he had chosen to climb blindly. He replayed every detail of their life together. The house deed she signed, the company structure she maintained, the financial files she balanced, the respect she commanded everywhere they went. He had mistaken her gentleness for fragility, never realizing that true power rarely shouts. Now he felt the consequences closing in on him like a tightening net. He knew that if Rita decided to walk away, he would lose not just love, but everything: his job, his home, his image, and perhaps even access to their unborn child. He tried to imagine a future with Selina, the woman who believed pregnancy automatically elevated her. What would it look like? A rented apartment using borrowed money? Child expenses he couldn't fully cover? A relationship built on secrecy and pressure instead of partnership and stability? The picture was ugly, embarrassing even. Selina wanted to be the center of his world, but she didn't understand that his world wasn't something he built alone. It was something Rita built with him. Without Rita's infrastructure, he was just another man with debts, responsibilities, and a baby on the way. Selina's demands for marriage, status, and attention suddenly felt like weighted chains instead of affection. Sitting alone in the living room one evening, Darius buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by regret. He wasn't just afraid of losing Rita. He was afraid of losing the version of himself he had become through her. Every opportunity, every growth, every elevation in his life had Rita's fingerprints on it. And now he had jeopardized all of it for fleeting pleasure. He realized with painful clarity that Selina's pregnancy wasn't the threat. His own stupidity was. The question wasn't whether Rita could leave. The real question was whether he had done enough damage to make staying impossible. While Darius's world was collapsing inward, Selina's fantasies were expanding outward. She couldn't understand why he wasn't reacting the way she imagined, why he wasn't sending flowers, calling repeatedly, or announcing decisions that would shake Rita's heart. To Selina, this was the moment she had been waiting for, the time for him to step up and claim her publicly. So she increased her demands. She wanted a bigger apartment. She wanted monthly allowances. She wanted him to introduce her to his family. And she wanted him to divorce Rita quickly, preferably before her belly began to show. In her mind, pregnancy made her the center of the story, and she didn't see why Rita still had a place in it. When Darius finally visited her, she wrapped her arms around him dramatically, expecting him to lift her off her feet or whisper sweet promises. Instead, he looked like a ghost, pale, drained, distracted. She pushed him to sit, placing her hand on her stomach for emphasis. "You have to start preparing," she said confidently. "We can't hide anymore. Tell your wife. File for divorce. Move me into a better place. I won't allow Rita to enjoy peace while I'm carrying your baby." Her tone was proud, victorious, almost scornful. She thought she was directing a man who was lucky to have her. But as she spoke, Darius saw clearly what he had blinded himself to before. Selina had never loved him. She loved the idea of winning. Winning status, winning wealth, winning recognition, winning a position she did not earn. She didn't understand consequences, didn't understand sacrifice, and certainly didn't understand what he was about to lose. He stood up slowly, looking around the furnished apartment he paid for with funds tied to Rita's company, and felt a wave of shame wash over him. Selina saw this baby as a weapon. Rita saw hers as a blessing. And that difference was enough to make him choose which woman carried his future, not just his child. Rita invited Selina to the house with the calm composure of a woman who was done reacting and ready to reposition herself. She waited in the living room, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on her belly, her expression steady and unreadable. When Selina walked in, expecting chaos, Rita simply looked at her, as if she were an intern who had entered the wrong office. "Sit," she said softly, yet with a tone that made protest impossible. The silence between them grew thick, forming an invisible wall that Selina couldn't climb. Rita's eyes remained fixed on her with such unnerving calm that Selina's earlier confidence began to crack. This was not the broken wife she expected to meet. This was a woman who had lived through storms and learned how to choose silence that cuts deeper than shouting. She let the moment stretch until Selina shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that she had stepped into a space she did not control. When Rita finally spoke, she did so with a serenity that felt colder than anger. She told Selina, "Pregnancy did not elevate you. It only exposed where you stand." Her voice was low, measured, powerful, not because it was loud, but because every word carried truth and intention. She explained calmly that a pregnant mistress was not a queen. She was a liability. That a baby born from betrayal was not a crown. It was a reminder of desperation. Rita never insulted her, not once, but the precision of her words dismantled Selina's false sense of victory piece by piece. She continued with a level of emotional intelligence Selina couldn't possibly match, telling her that being pregnant for a man did not mean she was chosen, especially when the man was drowning in fear of losing the woman who anchored his existence. She reminded Selina, indirectly but sharply, that Darius didn't come to her out of love. He ran to her out of weakness. By the time Rita finished, Selina felt her chest tighten with confusion, humiliation, and disbelief. She had come expecting to see a woman threatened, broken, intimidated, but instead, she found a woman who had already accepted the truth and positioned herself above it. Rita stood up and leaned slightly forward, her eyes unwavering. "I am keeping my child. I am keeping my home. But I do not need to keep him, not if he chooses chaos. And you will not destabilize what you did not build." Selina stood there speechless, realizing she had miscalculated not just the marriage, but the woman at the center of it. As she left the house, her footsteps felt heavier, her victory felt uncertain, and for the first time since her positive test, she questioned whether she had ever been in control of anything at all. When Selina returned to her apartment, she expected Darius to rush over, comfort her, and reassure her of their future. But instead, her calls began going unanswered, and her messages received delayed, half-hearted replies. At first, she excused it, telling herself he was overwhelmed, or that Rita had cornered him. But as minutes became hours and hours stretched into days, she realized something far more alarming. Darius was pulling away, not toward her. He visited less often, spoke less confidently, and every time he looked at her, she could sense the discomfort he was trying and failing to hide. Instead of becoming his priority, she began to feel like a responsibility he wished he could undo. And nothing terrified Selina more than becoming a burden to a man she had believed she was meant to replace a wife for. Her attempts to provoke urgency only worsened things. She demanded he make decisions, insisted he declare their relationship publicly, pushed him to choose her boldly the way she had fantasized he would. But the more she pushed, the harder he recoiled, treating her with the caution of someone touching a wound. She didn't understand that Rita's silence had forced him to face the full weight of his actions, and that weight wasn't pushing him toward the mistress, but toward the woman who held the power to destroy or save him. While Selina imagined pregnancy made her the center of Darius's world, he now looked at her belly and saw complications, financial strain, social embarrassment, and a future filled with turmoil. He wasn't cruel. He was simply terrified. And fear, Selina soon learned, is not an emotion that binds a man to a mistress. It's an emotion that drags him back to his wife. The breaking point came when Darius arrived at her apartment one evening with a tired expression and eyes that couldn't meet hers. He sat down heavily and said, "I need time." But his tone didn't sound like a man buying time to choose a mistress. It sounded like a man begging life to slow down before it destroyed him. Selina tried crying, then yelling, then clinging to him, but nothing shifted the wall he had built. She realized painfully that she was beginning to lose the one thing she thought pregnancy guaranteed: attention. Worse, she was losing relevance. She had imagined her belly making her powerful. Instead, it made her feel invisible. And for the first time, she understood the brutal truth. She was not competing with another woman's pregnancy. She was competing with another woman's stability. Darius couldn't bear the silence anymore. After days of pacing, sleepless nights, guilt-filled mornings, and failed attempts to pretend everything was normal, he approached Rita, while she was arranging files in the study. She didn't look up immediately. She simply continued flipping through documents until he cleared his throat with a sound that betrayed his fear. When she finally lifted her eyes, the weight of his mistakes crashed onto his shoulders so heavily he almost fell. Without another word, he dropped to his knees in front of her, his voice breaking as he begged her not to leave him. This wasn't a performance. This was a man who had seen the edge of a cliff and was now begging the ground not to disappear beneath him. His hands trembled as he held her knees, tears spilling down his face in a way he never thought himself capable of. He whispered apologies, explanations, regrets, everything tangled together in desperation. Rita watched him with the stillness of a woman who had cried her tears privately and now had none left to offer the scene before her. She didn't touch him, didn't console him, didn't even interrupt. She let him talk until his voice cracked and his breathing grew ragged. When he paused to catch his breath, she finally spoke, not to offer forgiveness, but to ask, "Do you know what you almost destroyed?" Her question wasn't rhetorical. She wanted him to say it. She wanted him to acknowledge the magnitude of his betrayal, not just emotionally but structurally. She wanted him to name the stability she had given him, the foundation she had built under his life, the future she was carrying inside her. And he did. With shaking lips and a voice full of shame, he confessed that he knew he would be nothing without her, that his life, his career, his future, were all anchored in her strength. She let him speak until he exhausted himself completely, until he leaned his forehead against her thighs like a child seeking shelter. And then, with a calm that felt colder than a slap, she said, "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I know I can live without you." That sentence shattered him. He clutched her tighter, desperate, terrified, broken. For years, he had believed he was the pillar of the marriage, the man in control, the provider. Now he understood the truth. Rita was the pillar. Rita was the anchor. Rita was the foundation. And if she chose to walk away, he wouldn't just lose a wife, he would lose himself. Selina felt the shift before she saw it. Days turned into a blur of unanswered calls, short text replies, and nights where she lay in bed with one hand on her stomach and the other clutching her phone like a lifeline. Every hour that passed without hearing from Darius felt like a betrayal. She had built her entire future around the belief that her pregnancy made her indispensable. Yet here she was, alone, anxious, and increasingly invisible. When she finally cornered him during one of his reluctant visits, her emotions exploded. She cried, accused him, held his hands, begged him to prioritize her, to choose her, to acknowledge the child she was carrying. She kept saying, "I'm the one sacrificing. I'm the one carrying your baby." But for the first time, those words sounded small, almost childish, compared to the magnitude of what he was fighting to keep at home. Darius tried to be gentle at first. He spoke softly, avoided her gaze, talked about needing time and clarity. But Selina wasn't fooled. She realized he wasn't confused. He was choosing. Choosing Rita. Choosing stability. Choosing survival. So she tried the one thing she thought would compel him. She threatened to go public, threatened to call Rita again, threatened to expose everything. But the moment she said it, Darius stiffened with a coldness she had never seen in him. He reminded her firmly that any scandal would destroy him, and in destroying him, she would also destroy the very lifestyle she hoped to enjoy. He told her plainly that if she pushed too hard, he would withdraw completely, legally, emotionally, and financially. It was the first time he spoke to her not like a lover, but like a man cornered and defending the last piece of sanity he had. When he walked out that evening, Selina felt a terrifying emptiness spreading across the room. She sank onto the couch, tears sliding down her cheeks, and finally understood that pregnancy was not the trophy she thought it was. It wasn't giving her power, it was trapping her. She wasn't carrying a victory. She was carrying a responsibility she had no structure to support. And the one man she thought would stand with her was slipping further away each day. She realized painfully that she was not losing Darius. She had never truly had him. While Selina unraveled emotionally, Rita embraced a different kind of stillness. She began focusing on her health with the determination of someone protecting both herself and her child from unnecessary chaos. She took her supplements on time, attended her antenatal appointments, scheduled massages, and even went on slow evening walks around the estate, letting fresh air fill her lungs and soften the jagged edges of her thoughts. Her silence remained, but it had changed shape. It wasn't an emotional shield anymore. It had become a form of self-preservation. She didn't need to shout to express pain or display resilience. Her quietness was not a retreat. It was a strategy. Every step she took was deliberate, protecting her baby from stress and protecting her mind from the noise of betrayal. Inside the home, she remained polite but distant. She answered Darius's questions with calm simplicity, not cruelty. She allowed him to serve her meals, attend appointments with her, and sit beside her whenever she rested. But she gave him no promises and no reassurance. She didn't treat him like a husband. She treated him like a man who was trying to regain a lost privilege. And that shift in attitude tormented him more than anger ever could. Each time he tried to apologize or express remorse, she would listen quietly, nod once, and return to whatever she was doing. Her refusal to crumble made him see her differently, not as a wife depending on him, but as a woman he depended on more than he ever understood before. As her body changed and her belly grew, she began to feel a deeper connection to the life inside her. She would place her hand over her stomach and whisper things she did not share with anyone else. Words of protection, promises of stability, and affirmations of strength. She wasn't hiding from a world. She was preparing for it. She began journaling daily, writing down her emotions instead of expressing them outwardly. She allowed healing to come on its own schedule, without forcing forgiveness or pretending her heart wasn't wounded. Through it all, she carried herself with grace, the quiet, disarming kind that makes people rethink their decisions. And unknowingly, her calm journey toward motherhood became the mirror that showed Darius the true weight of what he had almost thrown away. Selina's breaking point came the afternoon she returned to her service department only to find a neatly folded document slipped under her door, a notice from the property managers informing her that the lease would not be renewed, and the final month had already been paid through a corporate source that was no longer authorizing extensions. She froze. Her heart pounded as she dialed Darius frantically, but he didn't answer. Again and again, reality began to dawn on her slowly, painfully. This apartment wasn't paid for by some secret personal savings Darius had tucked away. It was funded through the company, Rita's company. The realization spread through her chest like cold fire. She suddenly understood that the place she felt so proud to live in, the home she flaunted to friends, the bed she thought proved her superiority, all belonged to a woman she had tried to disgrace. And that woman, with a silent flick of her authority, was reclaiming everything. In desperation, Selina tore through her wardrobe, pacing the room like a trapped animal. Her pregnancy, once her symbol of victory, felt heavier, almost like chains around her body. She tried texting Darius long paragraphs, filled with pleas, threats, and emotional blackmail, but his responses were painfully short. "I'll call you later. Let me sort things out. Don't stress yourself." Each message was a reminder that she no longer had access to the man she believed she had captured. When she finally got him on a call, his voice was flat, exhausted, and nothing like the man who once whispered promises in her ear. He explained weakly that he couldn't fight Rita, couldn't challenge legal documents, couldn't antagonize the person who controlled his financial oxygen. And even though he didn't say the words directly, Selina heard them clearly between the lines. "You are too expensive a mistake for me to fight for." After the call ended, she sat on the floor with her back against the bed, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The apartment suddenly felt too big, too empty, too cold. The walls echoed with her own breathing, and for the first time, she felt the crushing weight of loneliness. She thought pregnancy made her powerful. Instead, it made her vulnerable. And as she looked around at the elegant furniture she would soon lose, and the quiet, polished space she once considered a stepping stone to greatness, she finally cried, not out of anger at Rita or even betrayal from Darius, but out of the realization that she had gambled with a future she never truly owned. Rita had not lifted a hand, had not shouted once, had not insulted her. Yet here she was, packing the consequences into cardboard boxes, one painful breath at a time. Rita went into labor on a soft Wednesday evening while the estate was quiet, the sun already dimming into a soft orange glow. She felt a sudden tightening in her abdomen, followed by a rhythm she had never experienced before, steady, deliberate, insistent. Darius panicked immediately, running around the house like a man searching for lost salvation. But Rita, even in her pain, remained strangely calm. She grabbed her hospital bag, breathed through the contractions with fierce determination, and allowed him to help her into the car. The drive to the hospital was tense. Rita focused inward, gripping the seat as waves of pain rolled through her, while Darius whispered prayers under his breath, begging God for forgiveness, mercy, and another chance to be worthy of the woman fighting through pain beside him. In the delivery room, Rita bore down with a strength that surprised even the nurses. Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of power. She was pushing not just a child into the world, but a new chapter of her life. Hours later, when the cries of a newborn filled the room, Darius broke down completely. The sight of his son, tiny, wrinkled, perfect, shattered him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He held the baby with trembling hands, tears sliding down his cheeks as he whispered promises to be a better man. But when he looked up and saw Rita resting, exhausted yet radiant in a way only mothers can be, the full weight of his betrayal hit him again like a fresh wound. This woman had carried life inside her while carrying the pain of another woman's pregnancy. She had endured betrayal with quiet dignity, never once allowing bitterness to infect the child growing under her heart. Her strength humbled him. Her resilience crushed every excuse he ever made. In that moment, he understood that he wasn't just witnessing the birth of his son. He was witnessing the rebirth of the woman he took for granted. Later that night, when the nurses left them alone, Darius pulled a chair to the side of the bed and held Rita's hand with both of his. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she felt the weight of his grip and the sincerity behind it. He didn't apologize, not out of pride, but because no apology felt big enough for the damage he caused. Instead, he said quietly, "Thank you for giving me this chance, even when I didn't deserve it." Rita didn't respond immediately. She simply watched him with tired eyes, searching his soul, and then whispered, "This child deserves the best version of you. I hope you're finally ready to become him." Her words were not approval. They were a challenge he knew he had no choice but to rise to. Selina gave birth 3 weeks later, but it was nothing like she had imagined. There was no partner pacing the hallway, no eager father holding her hand, no luxury hospital suite. She lay alone in a standard ward, gripping the side rails of her bed as the contractions tore through her like violent waves. Her cries echoed without comfort, and every time the door opened, she hoped it was Darius, but it never was. The nurses were kind but busy, offering polite encouragement, but no emotional support. When her baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a small tuft of hair, Selina expected the rush of joy she'd heard mothers talk about. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sadness, a sudden awareness of the world she had created for this child, a world where she was alone, financially unstable, and emotionally wounded. She cradled him tightly, tears dripping onto his tiny blanket, and whispered apologies he couldn't understand. Later that day, the nurse informed her that the hospital bills needed clearing. Selina's stomach dropped. Darius had stopped sending money weeks earlier, and the last funds she had were already dedicated to food and prenatal care. She tried calling him once, twice, 7 times, but he didn't answer. Eventually, he sent a short text, "I'll send something tomorrow. I'm with my family." Those 4 words shattered her. My family. Not my son. Not my responsibility. Not even I'm sorry. She stared at the message until her vision blurred, the emptiness in her chest expanding until it felt like she couldn't breathe. She had spent months believing she would one day stand where Rita stood, next to Darius, publicly accepted, cared for, respected. Now she realized she wasn't even standing next to him in the lowest moment of her life. That night, as she fed her newborn in the dim hospital light, Selina understood a truth she had never been brave enough to admit. She had built her dreams on a man who was never hers, a future on a foundation that belonged to another woman, and her confidence on a pregnancy that could not replace loyalty or character. She looked at her son, innocent, peaceful, undeserving of any of this, and felt a strange resolve settle inside her. She couldn't chase a man while holding a child. She couldn't beg for attention while someone depended on her for survival. And she certainly couldn't continue imagining a life where Darius was her salvation. She realized, finally, painfully, that she needed to build a world for herself and her child instead of waiting for a man who would never choose her. When Rita returned home with her newborn, she moved through the house like a woman rediscovering a familiar place with new eyes. The baby's soft breaths filled the rooms with a sense of hope, but the shadows of betrayal still lingered. She didn't pretend everything was fine. She didn't force forgiveness. Instead, she approached the days with intentional distance, allowing Darius to help, but never allowing him to assume his previous place in her emotional world. He cooked, cleaned, bathed the baby, did night feedings, and changed diapers. He moved through the home like a man on probation, desperately rebuilding trust one small act at a time. He didn't complain. He didn't ask when things would return to normal. He simply kept serving, understanding that consistency, not words, was the currency he needed to pay. Rita watched him quietly, noting every shift, every effort, every moment of accountability. She saw how fatherhood softened him, how he looked at their baby with awe, how he kissed the child's forehead like a man who feared losing everything again. But she didn't let these moments erase the pain. Healing, she knew, was not the same as forgetting. In the evenings after the baby slept, they sat in silence more often than conversation. When Darius tried to initiate deep discussions, Rita didn't shut him down, but she didn't rush into them either. She answered thoughtfully, but with boundaries. "I'm still hurting," she told him one night. "And I won't pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable." Her honesty disarmed him. It also guided him. Over time, Darius began to understand that rebuilding the marriage wasn't about proving he loved Rita. It was about proving he respected her. He realized that Rita was not just the woman he married. She was the architect of the stability he took for granted. Slowly, the silence between them began to soften, not through dramatic reconciliations, but through daily acts of responsibility, humility, and emotional maturity. Rita didn't force herself to trust him again. Instead, trust began to regrow naturally, quietly, just like everything strong in her life did. The cracks in their marriage were still visible, but now they were becoming part of a story that might one day be told without bitterness. 1 year later, the house looked different, not because of furniture or decor, but because of the atmosphere inside it. There was laughter now, but the light kind, not the forced kind. There were conversations that felt honest, not cautious. Their son toddled around the living room, his small feet pattering across the tiles as he chased his toys, filling the home with innocent joy. Rita sat on the sofa watching him, her lips curved into a soft smile that held both pride and gratitude. She had survived betrayal, carried her child with grace, and rebuilt herself emotionally without losing her identity. She wasn't the same woman she had been a year ago, and she didn't want to be. She had become stronger, wiser, calmer, and far more attuned to her own worth. Darius sat beside her, not holding her hand, but close enough to show presence. He had learned that intimacy wasn't just physical closeness, it was accountability, respect, and consistency. He still saw the guilt in his reflection sometimes, but he no longer let it cripple him. Instead, he used it as a reminder to never repeat the mistakes that nearly destroyed his family. He watched Rita with the reverence of a man who knew he had been forgiven but never forgotten. And he accepted that. He didn't ask for more. What he had now, a peaceful home, a healthy marriage, a child who adored him, was more than he ever deserved, and he was determined not to squander it. One quiet afternoon, as their son climbed into Rita's lap giggling, Darius turned to her and asked softly, "Why didn't you leave me?" Rita looked at him for a long moment, her fingers gently brushing their child's hair. Then she answered with a calmness that pierced straight through him. Because I don't let other people's chaos scatter my destiny. I decide my future, not your mistakes. She didn't say it with pride. She said it with truth. Selina had disappeared from their lives, fading into a chapter she was never meant to dominate. And Rita remained, the woman who didn't win because she fought, but because she stood firmly, quietly, and powerfully in the truth of who she was. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.